Welcome into part one of the week 8 preview show where we're going to go over 5 games in today's video. We have 15 games to go over total. Obviously, the Thursday night game we won't be going over in terms of who to start and sit. Today is Friday, October 27th, so we are just getting it's still in the morning here in the mountain time, so we're still getting some updates on players and who's going to play and who's not going to play. So keep that in mind, and we're just going to get right into it. We're going over who you should play, who you should start, who you should sit. This week, we have no bye week, so it makes it a little more interesting on who to start and who to sit. And we're not going to talk about the obvious players. We're just going to talk about the main, the fringe players. So we're going to get right into it. Half PPR is all of our rankings and numbers, and we're going to start with the Texans at the Panthers, over under 43.5. Texans are favored by 3.5. I believe both these teams are coming off a bye, if I remember correctly. So we'll start with the Texans. CJ Stroud's, they're going to have a lot of interesting players. CJ Stroud's an interesting one to me. So the reason why he's interesting is because you probably either A, you picked him up because you needed a quarterback. And if that's the case, you're probably starting him. Or B, you picked him up even though you had a stud quarterback, maybe to have a good backup or to keep away from other people. So what we are going to do here is just kind of go through a list of guys that I would start over CJ Stroud this week. 1 second here. Okay, so the obvious ones are Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, who's already played, Justin Herbert, Tua. I'm going to play Goff over Stroud against the Raiders. I'm going to play. Now it starts getting tough already. To me, he's pretty easily a top 12 guy, but it starts to get pretty interesting in my opinion here. I'm probably going to play Stroud over someone like a Trevor Lawrence. He's been on the injury report. I don't think it's serious for Trevor Lawrence. He goes up against the Steelers, who I don't think are the worst team for quarterbacks. They're actually kind of middle of the road. They started off a little poorly, but they've been better in the last couple of weeks. I think I'm going to take Stroud, who, again, is playing the Carolina Panthers. I think I'm going to take Stroud over Trevor Lawrence here. I just think the Panthers are one of the better teams. They're 15th in the NFL in terms of quarterbacks, but they haven't played they played Ritter, they played Carr, they've also played Geno, Cousins, Goff, Tua. So Ritter and Carr didn't put up big points against them. Geno put up over 16. Cousins had a bad game. Goff put up over 25. Tua put up over 20. So I think I'm going to roll with CJ Stroud over Lawrence. Joe Burrow versus the 49ers is an interesting one. Like, who would you go there? I'm probably just going to lean Burrow here. I feel a little more confident in Burrow. I know he has a bad matchup, but we did just see Kirk Cousins put up over 20 points. We've seen Josh Dobbs put up over 20 points against them. So, I'll probably take Burrow. It's Joe Burrow, it's still Joe Burrow, and I know he hasn't been the greatest this year, but I'm not going to start CJ Stroud over him. Kirk Cousins against the Packers is another interesting one. I'm going to lean Cousins here. Again, I feel like there's a little more safety with Cousins. Now, Dak Prescott against the Rams, that's a tough one to me. That really is a tough one. I'm probably going to go with Dak Prescott, but I wouldn't blame you if you chose Stroud. And that's kind of where we cut it off. Like Russell Wilson, Jordan Love, Stafford, I'm starting Stroud over all those guys. So hopefully you're not in a position where you have to make it. If you do, maybe you can trade one of your players if you have two good quarterbacks. Excuse me there. But yeah, those are the guys I would start over Stroud. Now, the running back position is also tough. Dameon Pierce. He has a really good matchup, again, against the Carolina Panthers. I'm just going to double check here for the Carolina Panthers. They've given up the second most fantasy points to running backs this year. They gave up a big game to Algier, Robinson, Tony Jones, in week 2. Don't even remember that. I think he was with the Saints, actually. Kenneth Walker had a big game. They held Madison and Akers in check. David Montgomery had a good game. Raheem Mostert had a big game on him. So I'm just worried about the split here with them. It's really, really tough when it comes to this team with Dameon Pierce, and they're just not really using him. We saw that Devin Singletary, I think, outsnapped him last week and had more carries. Dameon Pierce has had 2 fine weeks, 2 double-digit weeks of half PPR points. I'm going to try and get away from him if I can. Guys like Kareem Hunt, Gus Edwards, obviously Ramondre, Madison, I'm starting over him. I'm starting if Miles Sanders is out in the same game. I think I'm going to start Chuba Hubbard over Dameon Pierce. I'm worried that we're not going to get the touches coming off the bye week. Devin Singletary could have a bigger role, in my opinion. Miles Sanders has been a full practice, so it looks like he's going to play. So I would take Pierce over Chuba Hubbard. But, Darrell Henderson against Dallas, I'll take Pierce, but I don't love it. Najee, I'm taking Najee over Dameon Pierce. I'm not even a huge Najee guy. Zach Moss is an interesting one. I'm probably going to take Zach Moss over Dameon Pierce because I think that team's going to want to run the ball. And if things go well, as according to plan, where they're in the game, I think Zach Moss gets 15 touches. And I can't guarantee that for Dameon Pierce. I just can't. It's unfortunate, but, I have him on a team or two, and not even that I'm a big Pierce guy, but we've seen 2 games where the guy has had more than 15 carries. 2 this year. 13, 20, 24, 14, 15, 11. And again, he played in a positive, great game script for them where they were in the game. It was a close game. They won the game in week 6 against the Saints. He had 33% of the snaps. So I'm going to lean Najee Harris, Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, DeMercado over Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders, if he's fully healthy, over Dameon Pierce. That's just kind of where I'm at with him. So I want to avoid him if I can. And with no teams on buys this week, I think I can avoid him. Just real quick on the receiver side of things, T. Higgins, Cortland Sutton, Amari Cooper, even without Deshaun Watson, Drake London, Josh Palmer, all these guys over Dameon Pierce, in my opinion. So I'm worried about what I saw. I'm worried about the comments of the head coach saying, this is what we want to do. We want to use both these guys. And I'm worried that coming off a bye week is the perfect time to make that transition. So that's where I'm at with Dameon Pierce. Nico Collins, to me, is probably I think at this point, a must start. To me, he's a top 24 receiver pretty easily. Obviously, if you're stacked at receiver, that's good for you. But I'd start Nico Collins over Terry McLaurin. I'd start Nico Collins over George Pickens, over DK Metcalf in a bad matchup. I just like the matchup for Nico Collins. And, the fact of the matter is we've seen Nico Collins put up huge weeks. So he has 2 huge weeks. He has 2 other fine weeks in half PPR, double-digit points, and then 2 down weeks. So that's kind of where he's at. And I just like this matchup. I think this matchup against just double-checking. Oh, yeah, it looks like Robert Woods is going to miss time too, or maybe miss the game as well. I know Tank Dell is back, but I like this matchup. Carolina Panthers, they give up it says 14th fewest to wide receivers, but part of that is involving Atlanta week 1 where they just didn't throw the ball and things like that. So if you have a good receiver, Tyreek Hill, Waddle, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Chris Olave have all put up good games against them. So I'm going to start Nico Collins for the most part in most 3 wide receiver leagues. Tank Dell is another one. We got to be a little bit like temper our expectations a little bit with Tank Dell. We've seen 2 big games, and then 3 kind of very disappointing games, and then he missed a game with concussion. So he is healthy. I do think he's a very talented player. I want to avoid starting him if I can. Like, I'm easily starting guys like Josh Palmer, Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson, Josh Downs over Tank Dell in half PPR even. Rashee Rice probably over Tank Dell at this point, with Rashee Rice playing Denver. But, if you're deciding between like Tank Dell and Jerry Jeudy, Romeo Doubs, KJ Osborne, then I'm going to take Tank Dell. That's kind of where I'm at with him. It's just I want to kind of wait and see if, like, is Dalton Schultz a problem for Tank Dell? Can him and Nico Collins not survive? Both have big games together. I know they may have had one big game together, but we've seen, again, one fantastic game out of Tank Dell. In terms of, for fantasy points, we've seen 2. For real production on the field, we've seen 1 fantastic game from Tank Dell and 1 good game from Tank Dell, and then 3 like okay games. So Texans are tough. Dalton Schultz, I believe he's not on the injury report. No, he's generally he's another one where you want to watch with Tank Dell and Schultz together. But if you're talking about Schultz over Ferguson, Logan Thomas, Jonnu, Komet, and Njoku, I'd start Schultz over all those guys. I wouldn't start him over the top guys, and I would start Taysom Hill over Dalton Schultz if Taysom Hill's healthy. So spent a lot of time on the Panthers there, or on the Texans. So we'll move on to the Panthers, and you're starting Adam Thielen, no problem, and Miles Sanders. I think unless you're pretty deep at receiver, at running back, I don't know. Like, we'll talk Miles Sanders for a little bit. If he's healthy, I'll take him over Chuba Hubbard still. I don't love it because maybe they're going to give Chuba a little bit more of a playing time and more of a split backfield, which is kind of what they're saying. So if I can avoid Miles Sanders, I would. Like, I'd start Gus Edwards, Kareem Hunt, Darrell Henderson, Najee Harris, Zach Moss over him. But I wouldn't start Jalen Warren, Singletary, not yet at least. Roshan, not yet. I wouldn't start those guys over Miles Sanders. So, to me, he's like a low-end running back 3. If you need to start him, you can. But if you have someone better, Deontay Foreman, Javonte Williams, Alexander Madison, all these guys I think are better than Miles Sanders. In terms of receivers, I'd start guys like Romeo Doubs, with maybe Christian Watson missing time. I'd start guys like Michael Thomas over him, Kendrick Bourne over Miles Sanders, Gabe Davis already played, I would have. Tank Dell in the same game I'd play over Miles Sanders. So I'm just worried that if he's not fully healthy and, they're going to move away and go more of a split backfield here. So I want to avoid him if I can. But that's kind of it for the Panthers. It's Adam Thielen, and that's kind of it. Like, that's the only player you even want to be starting. So we'll move on to the Rams at the Cowboys. Cowboys are favored by 6. The over-under is 45.5. When it comes to the Rams, like, I want to not start Stafford. He just hasn't been good for fantasy. So don't start Stafford if you can avoid it. Don't. If you're talking about Stafford versus like Minshew, I'd probably lean Stafford, even though Minshew had a big week. Just, I'm a little worried about another tough matchup, and we've seen bad games from Minshew, so a little bit more safety with Stafford. I'd start Stafford over like Carr, Ritter, Bryce Young, but not super excited about Matthew Stafford and starting him. The running backs are interesting because I think a lot of people are going to say like Henderson is the best one, but him and Royce Freeman essentially split the drives. You get this drive, you get this drive. And it just so happened that Darrell Henderson was on the drives that were a little more successful for the Rams. And so he got the touchdown, I believe, and just more, maybe more opportunities. So I don't see those two players that far off, actually, which makes me want to slightly avoid Darrell Henderson against the Cowboys if I can. Like if you're talking about Darrell Henderson versus like a Miles Sanders, Jalen Warren, Devin Singletary, Roshan Johnson, those guys that are kind of like the 1Bs on the team, then I'll take Henderson. But if you're talking about Henderson versus Kareem Hunt or Gus Edwards or Chuba Hubbard, then I will take those other guys over him. So not Chuba Hubbard, sorry. I think I said Chuba Hubbard. I'd probably start Henderson over Chuba Hubbard. Avoid him if you can, just because I'm not 100% convinced that this is his backfield alone. And that's what I want to avoid. Royce Freeman, I think, should be on rosters just for what I said. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Royce Freeman outscored Henderson if they do the same thing that they did last week, in which they rotate the drives, essentially. So that on top of a bad matchup just makes me really want to avoid these guys. Like, I could see like a very bad game coming. Like, James Conner is really the only running back that's had success against the Cowboys. I know McCaffrey had a touchdown, and Jordan Mason also had a touchdown, but man, I just want to avoid these guys. They shut down Eckler, Ramondre, Zeke, Saquon. Like, they're a good defense, and they're coming off a bye, so they should be pretty well rested. So avoid these Rams running backs if you can. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are obvious starts. Don't think we really have to explain that. On the Cowboys side, pretty easy team in my opinion. We'll talk about Dak for a little bit because he's probably the most difficult. Obviously those top guys you're starting over Dak. I'm starting Burrow over Dak. I'm starting Cousins over Dak. Stroud versus Dak is kind of a coin flip to me. And then that's about it. Like, I'd start Dak over Russ, Jordan Love, Stafford, Howell, all these guys. I'd start Dak over. So to me, you probably drafted him as your starting quarterback, and maybe you picked up someone along the way. A guy like the only guy above him that I think you could have picked up on waivers is CJ Stroud, who I'd start over him. Now, if you drafted Goff and Dak, I'd take Goff. If you drafted Lawrence and Dak, I'd take Lawrence. So that's kind of where I'm at with Dak Prescott. And I think the matchup is not terrible for him. We've seen Anthony Richardson, Jalen Hurts put up big games. So the Rams defense is actually pretty good unless you can run, it looks like. So that is something to keep in mind and watch. But Dak can run. Dak can get you some points on the ground. So, all those guys I named, I'd start over Dak. And the guys I said, I wouldn't. Moving right along. CD Lamb's an obvious start. Tony Pollard's an obvious start. Ferguson, if you kept him during the bye and he's like, I'm not starting obviously the main guys over him. I wouldn't have started Kincaid over him, obviously, hindsight. I'll start Pitts over Ferguson. I'll start Schultz over Ferguson. I'll start Taysom Hill over Ferguson. I like Taysom Hill's usage. If they're going to, I know Juwan Johnson's coming back, will be interesting to see. And Taysom Hill is on the injury report. But I really like what I saw from their usage of Taysom Hill, giving him 6-7 targets, and he's running the ball, and he can pass the ball, and they use him in the goal line. So, like Logan Thomas versus Jake Ferguson, I'll probably lean Logan Thomas, but that's kind of a coin flip. Either one could be better. I'll start Ferguson over guys like Jonnu, Komet, and Njoku. Yeah, if you held on to him, don't drop your guy, though. Like, if you have Ferguson and you're like, oh, I'm just going to drop him for if you have Logan Thomas and you're like, oh, I'm going to drop him for Ferguson, I just wouldn't do that, because you're just going to be chasing points and you're going to be upset if Ferguson doesn't hit and Logan Thomas does, and you're just going to be constantly chasing points. So that's it with the Cowboys. I'm not starting any of their other receivers. On to the Packers. So Vikings at Packers. Vikings are favored by 1.5. Over under is 42. Kirk Cousins is probably in starter range. Again, unless you have Hurts, Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, Herbert, Tua, Goff. I'd start Kirk Cousins over Lawrence at this point. Excuse me. I'll start Kirk Cousins over Lawrence. I don't think the Packers are necessarily a tough team for quarterbacks. I'm just going to double check that. But even so, they gave up good game to Ritter. That's about it, actually, only to Ritter. But, they've played guys like Fields in his first week when things were off, Carr, They played Goff and did well against them. Garoppolo, Russell Wilson. They haven't played that great of quarterbacks. So I'll take Cousins. He proved to me how good he was against the 49ers. And he proved a lot to me. And Kirk Cousins, like him or not, he is a QB6 on the year. He has 3 games over 20 points, one of them at 19.9. So essentially 4 games with 20 points or more. Another game with 17.5, and then 2 bad games. So I think he's going to have a good game against the Packers. So I wouldn't worry too much about Cousins. I'd start Burrow. I'd start Cousins over Burrow. I would. If you have both, I would. I'd start Cousins over Stroud as well. Over Dak, over Russ, all those guys. And if you ever want to look at the rankings that we're looking at Fantasy Pros, half PPR, Week 8 rankings, in case you want to kind of gauge what I mean there. Jordan Addison, to me, is you got to throw him in your lineup. The dude had a big game. And yeah, he's an obvious start as long as Jefferson's out. KJ Osborne, I want to avoid if I can. I think we've proven the fact that, we do this every year where it's like, oh, this wide receiver got hurt. This wide receiver is going to do well. It's like, no, not really. KJ Osborne's never proven he's that great of a receiver. And you know what? We talk about, oh, he's going to do well. He was out there already 90% of the time, even when Jefferson was healthy. So his snap percentage hasn't really increased that much, right? I know there's more targets to go around, but he still is getting 5 or 6 targets. So I don't want to start KJ Osborne if I can help it, I'd start KJ Osborne over Brandon Cooks or Josh Reynolds or something like that, over Christian Watson, who I thought, he's practicing in full. So I'd probably start Watson over Osborne, to be honest. So I'm just not very high on Osborne at all. And then Hawkinson's an obvious start. And Madison, given the nature of the running back position, man, this one's tough because I'm just going to double check here. Alexander Madison, I know here's his season so far in half PPR. Alexander Madison is the running back 20, which maybe you expected more from him. I think that's actually pretty good from my expectations of Madison. He started off the year kind of brutal. He did have, so he had 1, 2, 3, 4. He had 4 games with double-digit points, one of them with 9.2. So I'd say 5 games that you're happy with, 2 that you're upset with. One of them did come last week. It was against the 49ers. He still had 11 carries and 3 catches. Against the 49ers, tough defense. His snap percentage was at 53%, which is a little bit nerve-wracking if they're going to start using Cam Akers more. But I think at this point, you're going to play Madison for the most part. To me, he's a top 24 running back. He goes up against Green Bay, who has not been good against running backs. I'm just double checking. They gave up a big game to Bijan, a big game to Montgomery, a big game to Jacobs. Javonte Williams had a solid game against them. So I'm generally going to be starting Alexander Madison. If you're deciding between him or Ramondre, I'll lean Ramondre. If you're deciding between Madison or Gus Edwards, I'm going to lean Madison. Madison or Kareem Hunt, I'm going to lean Madison. Madison or Dameon Pierce, Madison. Right? So it's just more of there's not really other great options. Madison over the Steelers guys. Madison over the Rams guys. Madison over Zach Moss. That's where I'm at with Alexander Madison. So I would have probably started him over Rachaad White, and that would have maybe been a mistake. We'll see. Javonte, I'll take Javonte over Madison. I will. I think if they're going to have any chance against the Chiefs, it's going to be with Javonte. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Madison. I think he's kind of going to be a start for the most part. So, on the Packers side, man, this offense does not look good. I don't want to start Jordan Love. I'm really nervous about starting Aaron Jones, but I just don't think he's healthy is the problem. So, here's what I'll say about Aaron Jones. If your team is 2-5, you need to start winning now. We're in the second half of the fantasy regular season. You don't have a bunch of studs, obviously, because you are 2-5. And you need points. I would generally fade Aaron Jones. I'll take Foreman over Jones. I'll take Javonte over Jones, Alexander Madison over Aaron Jones, Ramondre over Aaron Jones. If you're on a team where I can live if Aaron Jones gives me 5 points, then start Aaron Jones because he has the potential to have big games. We've seen it before. I just don't think he's completely healthy, and it could be a thing that it might take. He might just need time off, and they're not going to get it type of thing. So that's where I'm at with Aaron Jones. If you desperately need the points and you can't afford a 5-pointer from one of your running backs, then don't start Jones because there's definitely that potential there. I'm just seeing what he had last week, 7.2 last week, so in half PPR. And then the receivers I really, really want to avoid if I can. Like, I really do. My favorite is probably Romeo Doubs. But it's pretty close between him and Watson. Like, not a terrible matchup, but all of them on the field, and I forget if Musgrave is hurt or not. I think he is hurt. Yeah, I don't think he's going to play, which helps these guys a bit. But if Aaron Jones is at full strength and Watson's at full strength and Dobbs is at full strength, I just don't know who's going to be the main guy here. So I really want to avoid him if I can. I really, really do. Just buyer beware kind of thing, Obviously, if you're talking about Romeo Doubs and Watson over like Samuel Osborne, Brandon Cooks, Josh Reynolds, Elijah Moore, yes, I'll take him over those guys. If you're talking about, Kendrick Bourne or Michael Thomas or Tank Dell or Rashee Rice, I'm taking all those guys over the Packers guys until I kind of see. We haven't seen this team fully healthy and kind of clicking, and we haven't seen what it looks like in terms of the targets. I still like Dobbs the most in terms of just like volume, but yeah, it's tough. It's definitely tough. And that's it for the Packers. So we'll move on to the Saints at the Colts. Saints are favored by 1. 43.5 is the over-under. With the Saints, pretty easy here. I'm not starting Jared Carr. Kamara's a easy start. Dude's on pace for 140 catches or something. Well, if he played a full season, he's on pace for over 100 catches, I believe. Chris Olave, to me, I'm still starting. The talent is just too good. So the matchup's too good. The talent's too good. I'm starting Chris Olave. Just double checking here. I think he had a solid game. Yeah, he had 9.2 in half PPR. You're okay with that. His last 3 weeks, 8.2, 13.1, 9.2. Now, he just hasn't had the big boom week, but I think it will come, and this is potentially the week is going to come. Michael Thomas, if you need a safe floor of 8 points in half PPR with the potential to be double digits if he catches a touchdown, go with Michael Thomas because he's going to give you – he has not had less than 7 points in half PPR, and he's had 8 or more in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those, 5 of the 7 games. So if you need a safe 7.5, 8 points, take Michael Thomas. I'll take Kendrick Bourne over Michael Thomas. I'll take Michael Thomas over Tank Dell. I'll take Rashee Rice over Michael Thomas. I'll take Josh Downs over Michael Thomas. But, he got a touchdown, which is kind of what made his week. I'll take Thomas over Judy, over Osborne. So, but yeah, if you need that safe 7, 8 points, go with Michael Thomas with the potential to give you 12 or 13 because he catches a touchdown. On the Colts side, I know Minshew had a great week last week. I don't want to start him if I can. You shouldn't have to with no teams on buys. Jonathan Taylor to me is a must start from now on, until something happens. Zach Moss, he's still involved, but do we expect this to continue to go towards Jonathan Taylor? Now, I know they were basically 50-50 last week, but it's been Taylor going from 13% of the snaps to 43% of the snaps to now 50% of the snaps. This team's going to want to run the ball. I just don't want to start Zach Moss in a tough matchup. Saints are good against running backs. They're just a good defense overall. I think this offense has a chance to just be it's not out of the realm of possibility that this team just gets completely swarmed by the Saints defense and has a really bad game. So I don't want to start the RB2 or 1B, however you look at Zach Moss this week. If you need to start him, you need to start him. Like, again, I'll go through some names here. I would start Zach Moss, just looking at flex positions. I'd start him over Michael Thomas. I'd start him over Brian Robinson, Jerry Jeudy, Romeo Doubs, probably T. Mercado. Yeah, against the Ravens. But, I'd start Najee over Zach Moss. I would. I know it's not great, but I would. I'd start Henderson over Zach Moss. I'm just a little worried. Also, he is a little banged up as well. I forget what his elbow injury. So just keep that in mind. I think it's going to, again, we saw 15%, 42%, 50%. That's Jonathan Taylor's snap share over the last 3 weeks. So what if that goes to 60? Now you're not going to be as excited to start Zach Moss. Michael Pittman's an obvious start. Josh Downs, I like. Maybe not the best matchup, but I'd start Josh Downs over a Tyler Lockett, over Rashee Rice, over Tank Dell, over Najee in half PPR, over Gabe Davis. Probably not, but Gabe Davis already played actually. But I would have started Gabe Davis anyways, just for the upside, which I believe he hit. I'd start him over Kendrick Bourne. So he's a low end wide receiver 3. That's kind of what he is. And he has the potential, if he catches a big one or a touchdown, I like him a lot more in PPR than half or none. So, that's kind of it with the Colts. So we'll get into our last matchup with the Patriots at the Dolphins. With the Patriots, the only two guys I'm really going to talk about here are Ramondre Stevenson. To me, is back into kind of must-start territory, given where he drafted him and the nature of the running back position. Especially in this matchup, they could be down a lot, which means they'll throw the ball a lot, and Ramondre is going to benefit from that. Kendrick Bourne is the other guy I want to talk about. I like Kendrick Bourne. I like him if they're going to continue to use him this way. I'm a little worried, other guys coming back, is that going to affect his role? But I think at this point, you have to throw him in there. He's wide receiver 25 on the year. He's had back-to-back double-digit point weeks in half PPR. He's getting a crazy amount of targets, over 20 targets the last 2 weeks combined. I think you just have to throw him in there for the most part in a 3-wide receiver league. But I am a little worried about these other receivers coming back. So, Kendrick Bourne, I would take over Michael Thomas, the Packers guys. If you're talking about cross-positional stuff, I'd take him over Zach Moss, I think. I'd take him over Najee Harris. I know that sounds crazy, but I think I would. This game could be a shootout. But I'm not a shootout. I don't expect the Patriots could have to throw the ball a lot, I guess, is the big thing. And, they've found success the last couple of weeks with their offense in terms of just being able to move the ball. And I don't think that's a coincidence that it's because Kendrick Bourne has had been involved in the passing game. So, the Patriots put up 17 points against the Raiders, which isn't great, but it's better than what they did the previous weeks. And then they beat the Bills. So they found success a little bit offensively, and Kendrick Bourne's part of that. So I think it's going to keep being a part of that. That's all I want to talk about on the Patriots side. Dolphins guys are easy. You're starting Tua, you're starting Waddle, you're starting Tyreek Hill, you're starting Mostert if he plays. This team could put up 70 points. We've seen it already. So you're starting all those guys. So that's going to be it for this video for the part one of the Week 8 preview. We'll be back with 5 more games for the part 2. And as always, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on next.